and I turn onto Courtright Road, and there's a sign that says Stateline Speedway, and there's a car that's portrayed, and it's number 8. What's the significance?
That was Emery Mans.
Because of the first victory?
Pardon me?
Because he won the first race?
No, because he used to drive 8-ball.
Right.
And I just had to pick some numbers, so I took 8. And down the other end is M1, Bobby Snars.
Okay. What got you interested in this kind of business?
To be honest, my cousin, Don Little, used to race. And my dad started racing when Don did. And I lived with my grandparents. And Don would pick me up on the way to the Roll Bowl, let me ride up in his car, in his race car, you know. And that's how I got started.
So, Don, and then he had a brother, was it Glenn?
Yep, Glenn.
And both those drivers were portrayed in our movie.
Yep. Don was a lot better driver than Glenn.
Yeah. In fact, I think it was Glenn. Wasn't he the one that lost his teeth around the corner?
Right, yeah.
Funny story. So that got you kind of interested. Then you went from being a fan till at some point you decided you might even race.
I always wanted to be a wrestler or a race car driver. And then I started out when I was like 16 years old. I started out in the demolitions. And from there I moved up. I went to the service and come back and end up in the hooligans. I remember I was winning my first race up here, and that stupid number 3 went right by me. You remember him?
Tim Johnson.
Timmy Johnson. Yep.
So he stole your first victory, huh?
Yeah, he did. And I ended up winless. In a feature, I won a lot of heats, no features.
Yep.
But by the time I got where I could afford to race, it wasn't that important to spend that kind of money.
As you were, before you began a racer and you sat there in the stands watching the races here at Stateline, who were your idols, your heroes? When you were a kid, who did you want to emulate?
Probably Don Little. Probably. My dad wasn't any better than I was. But he raced, you know, and we built the car in the backyard, you know, and had to take it to the neighbors down to shell houses, and they welded the roll cage in it, and that's how it all started.
Where did your dad race? What tracks did he race in?
He raced here, and he raced rollable, and we also had a half-mile track right next to my house, which is where I had my first car wreck. We had a 58 Ford, and it was race day, and I went out, and my dad was gone. And I looked, and he's down there driving around the racetrack. So I jumped in our Studebaker truck and went down back, and I went flying right by my dad. And he motioned for me, go home. So I come up over the bank, and I turned around and looked to see if he was following me. And I ran right in the side of a guy's car. I took the whole side off a brand new car. That used to be called 3 Point Speedway. Fred Seamens owned it then. But the entrance come right through our yard. Yeah.
When you were there, the Squirt Johns, the Bobby Schnars, the John Seelys, the Kenny Johnsons, were they household names in your world at the time?
Yeah, I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade when I went to my first race. Everybody knew Squirt Johns, you know, and I remember the old Stateline Speedway. And I remember one night 4 or 5 cars burn up right in the front straightaway because they didn't have any way to get the fire out.
My gosh.
I'll never forget that.
Now, Skyline being in Sugar Grove, were they competitors with Stateline when that got it started?
Actually, Jerry Frank and them all worked at Skyline before they did Stateline. And I think the last year Skyline was open, Ed Nelson ran it.
The flag man.
Yeah, and they actually got together and were going to form a drivers union. Do you remember that? And then they weren't going to drive because of something and something. But that was a long time ago.
So a drivers union at Skyline?
Yeah.
I wonder if Emory was part of that. There may have been some conversation yesterday. We were talking to Jerry Frank about how the drivers ultimately moved, you know, from Skyline to Stateline.
Yeah.
Would that have been what kind of time period?
I think that had something to do with it.
Right.
And no matter what track, you know, this track has been lucky to be here this long. Usually they go and I could tell you a half a dozen different tracks where they used to be. You know, there used to be the Dickie Bend Speedway, and then right across from Thomas's junkyard down there where they do the right recycling, you know, you go across that creek and they had a racetrack over where they raced around the power lines over there, and the electric company made them take that out. But that's when I was a little kid, you know. And then right across from Cabin in the Pines on the other side of the road, years ago, the fire department had a track over there, and they actually had hoops on their cars, so when they rolled them over, they'd get out and they could roll them right back up.
At what point did you say, gee, I don't want to race, I don't want to spend the time and the energy to kind of build a car, but I'd like to own a track?
It just happened. To be honest with you, it happened like overnight. Jerry Frank put an ad in the program book that they wanted to sell Erie. And I looked at it, and I come to Leonard, and I said, Leonard, I'd be interested in buying Stateline, or in buying Erie. And they said, well, we got a guy, Ron Zock was interested in it, and he was going to get a bunch of guys to come together. Well, Ron Zock was a good friend of mine, but I knew he couldn't make it work. So I said, stop down, and he said, we'll be down tomorrow and talk to you after Zock dropped out. And Don was there, he was on vacation, and Jerry and Leonard come down to my house, and they actually laid on my couch, and they said, we'll sell you Erie for X number of dollars. And I said, I won't pay that for Erie, but I'd pay that for Stateline. They said, you would? And I said, yes, I would. And they said, it's yours. Just like that. They sold it without telling Don. He come home from vacation and actually cried because they sold me the racetrack. And he didn't even know anything about it.
And those were the 3 stockholders, was Jerry...
They had it. See, there was more of them. But as they died off, their wives couldn't take part in any of the business decisions.
Right.
They got to share the money, But as far as saying what was going to happen to the track, they had it written up so that they couldn't make any decisions. So Mildred Williams and so on couldn't make any decisions.
So ultimately, 2 of the 3 equity stockholders decided to sell it to you. And the next thing you know, this is only a lawyer would ask this crazy question. Did you buy the stock of the corporation, or did you buy just the real estate and the assets?
I bought the real estate.
Yeah.
And actually, we all used the same lawyer.
Yeah.
I trusted him. I just gave him the money, and at that point I was making a lot of money, and I just paid him cash. And when I bought this, the lawyer had it ready on my birthday.
Ah,
And there's 97 acres here. And that was my race car number.
oh, how wonderful. How serendipitous. Now, the Stateline Speedway, you obviously have that side and part of this side too?
16 acres on this side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, have you added anything to what was the original Stateline layout, the 97 acres?
No.
So,
No, there's enough land here. I mean, I don't need anything, you know.
And that was in the 80s, 1980.
Jeez, you know, I was afraid you were going to ask me this because I don't even know when I bought it. 1984, was it? It just happened so quick, you know.
did you?
Actually, I went in trying to buy Erie.
Right.
Is the one I wanted.
So here you are at Stateline Speedway from 1984. So there's really been 2 ownership groups over this 54-year period. Jerry's group and you.
Yeah.
From having owned this, 25 years, okay. What have you seen the change in the race? The whether it's the type of drivers, the number of drivers. What has changed over that time period?
I think in the beginning we had more race car drivers. The guys would go out 3 laps down and race, not pull in the pits because they got a flat tire. The old guys would be out there trying to get every spot, like a Scott Gerdek. You know, he's out there to win. No matter if he's 10 laps down, he'll race his heart out, and he puts on a good show for the people. And there's some of them, but I think there used to be more. And this was sort of the hub of racing. Actually, McKean County was designed after Stateline. They went down and took the measurements from here, and Jerry Frank and them leased McKean County and went down there and actually built the track like they did Stateline.
Mm-hmm. Did you, after you bought this, did Jerry and Don and Leonard, did they stay around at all? Did you keep them involved, or were they pretty much cut the cord at that time?
Well, Jerry helped me prepare the track.
Mm-hmm.
He did a pretty good job for me because as soon as I bought Stateline, they sold Erie to Tony White and Charlie Bono. Well, then Jerry, if you know Jerry, he says, well, you couldn't go wrong with Stateline, but you couldn't make Erie go. I said, let me teach you a lesson, son. I'll make Erie work too. And so I bought Erie. And there was enough, after all the years, you guys don't see this, there was so much dissension between the owners. Leonard did one thing. He took care of the maintenance of the electric and so on. Jerry Frank done this, that Williams done this, Don Frank took care of the food. But they didn't even hardly talk to each other before that. And when I bought Erie, Jerry Frank says, I'll finance Erie for you. Just make sure you don't sell it to Leonard. That's honest to God. He didn't want Leonard to have it. And
What was? Well, let's talk about some of those guys. What's your sense when I say Leonard Briggs? What's that mean to you?
Leonard was a great guy. He was honest. I mean, if he didn't like you, he'd tell you. You know, one thing, as soon as I bought Stateline, Bill Southwell had a party down there. It was a Daytona party, you know. And he had Jerry Frank there and me down to his house and so on. And Bill Southwell says, Jerry, you remember I told you, you see the same people on the way up you see on the way down. That was Southwell's words, you know, and how true that is, you know. But racing goes through cycles, you know, and we just try to keep it affordable now, and I'm lucky I've been able to do that, you know, and my junkyard has been able to finance a lot of the racetrack, you know, and I enjoy it.
Jerry Frank, what was his role? What kind of guy was he?
Jerry?
Yeah.
He was a hard worker too. They all were good at what they did. Jerry would go up there in the middle of the night and start watering Erie, you know. And Don would help him, you know.
Don's 10 years older than Jerry, or?
Quite a bit older, I'm not sure.
Lloyd Williams, what was his principal role?
He was the catalyst that made everything work. He was really good at what he did. I can just hear him, his words now, you know, and I'd like to find somebody that has a tape of what he used to say. What was it, hub to hub and wheel to wheel or something? And I mean, but he was good at what he does. He brought the other guys together to get the job done.
Now, we know Marv Thorpe was in the ownership group for a short period of time. Did they ever talk about him, or did you have any sense of Marv Thorpe at all?
No, I knew Marv and I used to buy gas from him, and I used to know him as a car dealer. But as far as having anything to do the racetrack, I remember he used to drive number 1, and I watched him race, but I didn't know him. I was kind of a loner, you know. How I bought this, I have no idea, you know, or why I bought it, I have no idea.
It sounds like you're glad you did, though.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. When we say Dean Layfield, is Dean Layfield, would that been, as a kid, do you remember that?
Yeah, oh yeah, I remember him. I don't necessarily, what was he, 7/16?
9/16.
9/16, yeah. I remember that. My cousin started that. He used to race 2x4. Then everybody else went, you know, 2x6 and so on. But that is it. And the funny thing about being an owner is all of a sudden the guys that were your heroes all these years, like the Skip Furloughs and so on, all of a sudden you're their boss. You know, it's hard to accept that, you know, and to be able to treat them in such a way that they think that they're still helping make part of the decisions, you know, and I think that's why I've been kind of successful, you know.
by engaging some of those drivers in the decision-making process? Has that been part of your operating philosophy?
I am always open. Not necessarily will I change my mind, but I will always talk to somebody about their feelings versus my feelings and tell them why I think this will work or why I don't think it will work, you know.
What changes have you sort of made, whether to the racing card or classes, over the last 20-some years?
Well, I started the cadet class, which everybody said wasn't going to work. And I think the first night I had like 8 of them, and the second night I had 16, and the third night I had 30-some. And they're still going after 20-some years, you know. And there's a lot of good people in this racing. I've learned, if something happens on the track, you don't necessarily have to reprimand the guy right then. You're better off to wait, talk to him during the week or the next week, you know. Most of them will apologize to you, but don't put them in a position where they've got to make up their mind about one thing or another, you know, because it always ends up bad.
Right.
You know, I mean, I was great friends with Lars Hewings, you know, and we used to race through the parking lot at the end of the night. I had a little gremlin with a V8 in it, you know? And the race was over, and we went racing out through there, and I said, "How'd you do, Lars?" And he said, "Everybody hit me all night long, and that's your fault," you know? And at that point, I decided, never again am I going to go to a driver's car when the race is over, because that's when I hear all the worst of it, you know. But, you know, it is fun. I'm training Jennifer to take my place.
How's she doing?
Great. She's doing great, you know.
There's been one thing over the years. What's the biggest challenge you've had over all those years? Has there been one particular thing that's been hard to overcome?
You're always battling the townships and state police and everybody. For the very first night I opened, they had roadblocks at all the entrances to the speedway. The sheriff's department, town of Bustye, and the state police all had roadblocks set up on this road and down in Bustye. Well, I went right out to the cop, but I took my brother with me, and I said, "My lawyer wants your badge number, so when I sue you in court, I got your badge number," you know. Well, that ended the roadblocks. They haven't done that again, you know. And we come to an understanding with, I told them they're welcome to come in, go through the pits anytime they want to, but try not to bother the people. But they did it on the very first night, you know, and that, you know, if you know me, I don't take that stuff very easily. And I know sometimes, you know, sometimes it's tough to make payroll and to pay off a purse, you know. I pay good. I try to pay enough so that everybody can break even and not all put all the money on top, you know. Last year, I think we averaged about 180 race cars a night.
Wow. What's a normal purse per night?
They say when you go to a race car meeting that your purse shouldn't be over 12,000, but mine is approaching 20.
You had some big races even this year. That
Yeah, we had a lot of big races this year. I originally was going to do my own memorial race. I really was. I was going to do one for me and one for my wife, but the doctor said that I might live a little longer, so I'm waiting on that.
That would be a promotion.
yeah,
I know it. I would like to see who comes. You know.
What's your thoughts about the super late class as it's evolved to something that's the way it is today, and certainly something that's quite expensive for the drivers, but any thoughts on how that's evolved in that 25 years since you first took the track ownership?
It's always been expensive. I can remember in the old days, I used to get a car right out of the showroom, and Jim Scott went to P.J. Wiggers and bought a brand new Chevy to race, and he got it financed through GMAC. And then he brought it right up here and made a race car out of it. And there was a lot of guys did that. You know, the old 7-Eleven did that. I mean, there was a, you know, it's expensive, but it's the best racing there is. It's better than NASCAR by 10 times over. You see, like, 16, 17 different races here in the nighttime. At NASCAR, you see one race and you watch the last 20 laps, and that's the race, you know. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper, you know.
Do you, when you go to the track on any given evening, is there a couple of drivers that you'd say, watch him? Or you may go to your neighbor and say, watch him, he's really good. Watch how he does that. Sort of a model driver, competitor. Is there somebody sort of stands out or has stood out in your mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Somebody that runs the high side, and they put on a good show for the people, and that's what you like to have the people see, you know. Mm-hmm. And then you got guys like Rod Malloy that runs the inside. It takes everybody there to make a show, you know. And then you got Doug Eck that runs on the outside, and Scott Gerdak will run wherever you give him room. And through the years, you know, I've had several of the drivers going to quit running here just to teach me a lesson, you know. Then after a year or two, they're back.
Right.
You can't just make a rule for one guy. You got to make a rule that benefits everybody, not just one or two people, you know.
What kind of rules do you have the discretion over that would cause a driver to be upset that, you know, that you're either picking on him or you're discriminating against him? Give an example.
Some of the drivers will never get in position. You gotta almost hand feed them. I mean, you point, you start here. You know, I got good flagmans, and the scorekeepers are good, and they'll say, you know, car number 8 is supposed to be in the back. So you put him in the back, and then he wants to stop and talk about it. And then that makes the track owner very angry because you got all these people in the stands watching this stuff. You know, I can always give you a better spot, but I tell them I can always make it better, but if you do stupid things, I can't. I mean, you got to understand, I'll stick up for you even over my scores if I think you are right. And then I will face them at the end of the night. You know, I've had the flagman walk off the track. So I grab another one, and I own it, you know, and I hate to see anybody cheated, and that's another hard thing that you haven't asked. It's hard to get good officials who are unbiased. You know, I mean, somebody who can look over the whole picture, you know, because I was always on the bottom, and I like to take care of them guys as good as I do the guys on the top.
Right. How do you find them? How do you find officials?
Most of them come to me.
Okay.
There was, like Larry Malloy. Before I bought the racetrack, we always talked about what we would do if we ever owned this. So Larry was my first official. You know, and then there used to be a guy named Denny Chase who lives down south, you know, and but I've had guys, some of the drivers down to Warren didn't like it because I sold beer. And the tire rule, they don't run here because we got a tire rule. But the tire rule saves everybody so much money. They don't have to carry 3 or 4 different brands of tires to race. Everybody runs the same brand with 2 or 3 different compounds, so they've still got a choice, but they don't have to have, you know, Goodyear and Hoosier. We go with McCreary tires, and even Dick Barton come to me and he said, I thought when you went to a tire rule you were crazy, but you absolutely knew what you were doing. You know, I mean, it really works. And it doesn't save me nothing. You know, I'm just trying to save them money. The more money you can save the driver, the longer he's going to be able to stay in the racing deal.
For the camera, the tire rule is that you sort of dictated what tires could be used on the track?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And consequently, they donate money to your points fund, you know, and you get them a better price on the tire to begin with. And these aren't bad tires. They'll run with anybody almost anywhere, you know. I sell a good product at a good price, and I take the choice out of it.
Right, right. Are there other areas in the race car operation where you've taken the choice out, aside from the tire rule?
We try to get them to buy Cam 2 race fuel. We sell good fuel. It's Sunoco. It's the same gas they're running. NASCAR runs a particular brand of it. I mean, you know, so they've been in this a long time.
Right.
And we do little tricks and advertising and stuff to be able to sell the gas cheaper than most anybody around here.
Right, right.
And we make, if you ask, safety is, I guess, more important to me than anything. I don't know what I would do if somebody got really hurt bad. You know, I was the last one to let them go to round tubing, and I make them run the extra door bar and the doors, and just trying to keep them that much safer.
Was there an accident over that 25 years that when it happened, it scared you half to death?
Oh, my God, yes, in a demolition car. A kid got hit right in front of the flag stand, right in front of me. And another guy hit him, and when it did, it ruptured his gas tank. And he went to start his car, and everything just went up in fire. And they had to life flight him to Erie, and that just scared me to death. But the insurance company was good to me on it. You know, I said, God, guys, I am sorry this happened, and I carry Naughton Insurance, who seems to be the best. And they told me, hey, that's why you got insurance. Don't worry about it. And they come down and inspect the track every year. You know, every year I got more people inspecting me for something or another, you know.
Welcome to the state of New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, you know, if I could, I'd move this track just across the state line into Pennsylvania.
And here for years, I always thought part of it was in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It's a great marketing tool.
They used to tell you that because they only sold beer on one side, see?
Yeah.
And they tried to keep a family atmosphere where we opened it up and they can drink beer anywhere, but we've cut down on 99% of the problem. Mm-hmm. And usually if you get a problem, it's a woman involved in the darn thing, you know.
Yeah. A lot of
Really?
people, a lot of people behind the camera nodding here. I just want you to know this.
You know.
Was there, aside from the incident you just talked about, if you were to have to fill in the blank of, Greg, the most amazing thing or the most amazing finish I saw at Stateline Speedway this last 25 years was blank, what would you say?
There's so many of them. I've seen guys win who I never thought would win. Mm-hmm. You know, that happens every year. You know, I've seen guys string them out, but anymore has come and gone. You know, the competition is so tough. I seen guys like Denny Colvinbeck run 3 years before he ever won a heat race. This isn't easy, you know. And we do things like the two-seater, which is an excellent tool to let the people see what the race cars are. And we have problems every year with the Warren County Fair because they always run jalopy football against me on Saturday night. Mm-hmm. So this year, we taught them a lesson. We let everybody in for $4 and in the pits for $5.
Wow.
We had people parked all the way out here in my driveway. So much for the Warren County Fair. So don't be surprised you see that again next year. That works, and it brings a lot of people into the pits that wouldn't normally be there, and thus it creates more race fans, which is what you want. You know, we're getting some younger kids now going to be driving these cars. We've got 2 young boys that were excellent drivers this year. One of them's name was Half Pint, and I mean, they're not 5'2". They're just little guys, but man, they get out there and run. And I think that's going to be the whole future, you know. I hope.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta, in this Challenger class I got, it gets a lot of young kids started in something that they can get in and see if they like it cheaply. And I let them in for nothing, and they just run for trophies, and they get one person in the stands with them for nothing. So, you know.
I was just going to ask you, Fran, you've obviously owned this for 25 years, which is almost half of the entire time of Stateline's existence. When people reflect back and say, and ask you and say, what's the Fran Seamens legacy of this 25 years? What have you done that people will remember Does he harken back?
Well, Ronnie Blackmer said it once. It's either BS before Seamens or after Seamens, is how he told me when he still raced. And he said it's BS, you know, and I don't know. I just want to keep it going as long as we can, you know.
And you're still having fun doing this?
Yeah, I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Physically, I run half the races from a hospital bed. You know, whenever I'm in the hospital, I'm on the phone with Jennifer, telling her what the weather is going to be doing and what you better run next and next and next, you know. But she's learning. She's very good, and she gets along good with most of the guys, except I'm probably more lenient than she is, you know. But she's learning.
Is there a driver over this 25 years who said, this guy, during this 25 years, developed, as far as you were concerned, to be the best? He was the best driver during that snapshot, 25 years.
There's several, but Dick Barton's got to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He's been here. Him and I used to race together when I started, and year after year, Dick Barton, Rod Malloy, you know, longevity enters into this, as you know, and Dick has stayed good for so many years. And then you got guys like Chub Frank, you know, but he didn't necessarily run here, you know.
Right. Did he run here much during your time period?
Chub is kind of all for Chub, to be honest with you. You know, I used to sponsor him, and then just one year, he went to my competitor without even asking me, you know. Mm-hmm. And I think our friendship ended at that time because of the way I was treated. We have feelings too, you know. And most of these guys will do anything I ask them. Good, bunch of good people, you know.
I would like to know, Fran, why did you decide to sell Erie Speedway a few years ago?
Let me just tell you, if I had it to do over again, I would die first. I would not sell it.
What was your thinking at the time that prompted the sale?
I had open heart surgery in '06. I was having a hard time getting help to go to Erie, drive back and forth every day to work. Bobby's done a good job with it, but I think he's put all of his efforts in the wrong place. But if I had it again, and I told Jennifer, if things work right, maybe someday we'll own it again. You know, I've still got the money, and I wouldn't do it again, Randy. I would rather die than sell it, you know. I mean, when I sold Erie, it was gonna be, we were gonna run as a 2-track group. And then after 1 year, he goes with somebody else, another track, you know. And now every week I hear that he's gonna go to Saturday. You know, or if he does, I'll bury him. Mm-hmm. I'm a vengeful person. I'll run 2 nights a week if I got to. Mm-hmm. I'll race myself right into the ground.
Mm-hmm. What's the question that you expected that we haven't given you yet?
How nice a guy I am? No, I'm just bullshitting you.
BS, before seeing.
You're supposed to ask me what I get out of all this.
Let's do that.
I really don't know. I don't know. I've never been, you know. I tried to stay out. I've never, maybe one time have I ever had my picture taken with a race car driver. Memories. When I was first one up here ever to have 9 NASCAR drivers race, you know, I met guys like Neil Bonnet, Earnhardt, all these guys. I was closer than me to you from them. I mean, it's just something they can't take away from me. And I enjoyed it, you know, and I don't necessarily do what everybody else does. You know, I go out and I make my own decisions. And that's how I've always been, and it's got me this far, you know. I'm kind of surprised I'm still here, you know, as far as, you know, number of years, you know.
Well, for lots of reasons, we're glad you are. Talk about the NASCAR. I mean, I remember those when you brought in the big names. How did that happen?
I went to a promoter's workshop down in Florida on Daytona Beach. And they had a guy come over as a guest speaker. And he represented, he was Don Levy's son. Remember Don Levy that owns a late model, used to be from Richmond? Well, anyway, he owned a race car, and his son worked for these guys that got these guys together. And they sort of talked me into doing it, you know. It cost me $36,000 to bring him, which then was a lot of money. But I got 9 drivers, you know, and I talked to Earnhardt on the way back. I had Mr. Hoffman go get him in a bus, you know, and then I took him to dinner over to Red Coach, and they told me that I treated him better than anybody that ever brought him. And that's how I got him here. I remember throwing Mikey Waltrip out of here. You know, he come in and we got rained out twice in a row. So he said, I'm not doing autographs again. I said, listen, my friend, you more than anybody better do an autograph because nobody knows you. Well, I ain't. So the guy that was ahead of it, I said, don't bring him back. I don't want him back here. So I didn't. But when I went to Florida, who took me around the pits? Mikey Walter. Ask him. He'll remember me.
That's a great story.
But
You brought him in a couple of years, didn't you?
2 times.
And essentially, when they came here, was it just for autograph session, or did they actually drive?
No, they raced.
They raced.
And there again,
Somebody else's car. I mean, they
yeah, and that's why I got McCreary tires. It used to be McCreary, now it's American Racer. I called Hoosier to see if they would do anything for the driver that was going to let them drive their car. Hoosier didn't want to do anything. So when I called American Racer, they gave each of my guys a brand new tire for letting them drive. So then when you go to a tire rule, who do you go to?
Yeah.
You know, whoever helps me, I do the best I can to help them.
But was it just the 9? I'm kind of trying to, the race itself, was it just the 9 of them, or did you let some of the locals race against them?
No, just 9 of them.
You didn't let the locals play with them?
I don't know. Davies was gonna, but I'm not sure if he did or not. I I think they just all of them run together. And I remember sitting beside Harry Gant, and he kept spinning out on a time trial. And he kept saying, let me try one more time. I know I can get this. You know, and I remember him saying he made more money on that chicken movie he did than he ever did in racing, you know.
That's right.
But it's fun to be able to talk to those guys, you know.
Sure. Well, it was great for the area that you brought them in.
Oh, we were, the first time I was packed, and the second time I lost 30 grand.
Was it because of the weather?
Because of the weather, and we kept getting rained out, and we had to run them on a Friday night against the Warren County Fair.
Yeah.
They've always been a pain in my butt.
I'm kind of getting that sense.
But it, you know, a lot of people have got memories of them, and a lot of the drivers let them use their cars.
Sure.
And some of them developed a relationship with them. You know, and there's some of them guys not around anymore.
What other memories that you talk about? That's what some of the things you got out of Stateline Speedway were the memories. Bringing the NASCAR drivers in, certainly. Were there other ones that memories that you'd say, boy, that was magical?
I brought in a Playboy centerfold once. It almost got me divorced.
Really?
Yes, really.
I missed that one.
Oh, right.
Was you here that night, Randy?
I forgot about it, but I remember it now.
Melissa Mays. The same people who were going to book me, the NASCAR people, booked her with me. And then she didn't show up.
No.
And she called me 2 hours before race time, told me she missed her plane in California or wherever she was. So then they were so upset because she missed it, and they was afraid I'd cancel the NASCAR thing, that they sent her the next week for nothing.
Really?
And of course, I went and picked her up at the airport. You know, somebody had to do that.
Dirty job, and Fran did it. Now we're getting to
And then when the races were over, somebody had to take her back to her room, and we had to go down to Gilligan's Island and have some pizza. And it's one of the few mistakes I ever made in my life. But could have been a better situation. But I asked her what she did for men. She said, I just find one and go with him. Would you like to come to my room? No, I better go home. So I bought my wife a pizza, knowing that would smooth things over. I got back to the racetrack. My wife tried to turn the lights off. She had the lights half glowing, you know, and I took her home to the pizza, and she was still pissed. So the next day when I had to take her back to the airport, my whole family took her back. But that's one of them memories that I remember, you know.
I think we'd all have that one.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could top that one, but are there others of a similar unique? Because it sounds like you're very much a promoter. I mean, that's owning a track. You have to be a promoter. You have to think of the next opportunity that will draw, and those are three unique ones. Having two NASCAR and a Playboy centerfold.
I know it was. Well, Jerry Frank and them did a lot of good stuff when they had it, you know, and a lot of the stuff I do is a remake of something they did, you know, and now I'm copied a lot, like the King of the Hills and stuff. I started that, you know, and these Challenger cars, I started that. Now everybody's got them, and Jennifer says that's, they don't thank you, but it's
Compliment.
a compliment them following you, you know, and anybody that compares anything at a racetrack compares it to Stateline. We got more people in Stateline or this or that, you know, but they always compare it to us, you know. And that's something that kind of gets me a little bit angry is I furnish these guys a place to run every single night. And then 2 or 3 times a year they go run someplace else for a one-night deal. You know, I remember here 2 years ago they did that. They went to Little Valley to run. So I come up and paid them, what, $7.50 to start. I try to maybe punish the guys who weren't here, and that's how I do things. You know. Yeah.
Well, you can be justly proud that of all that you've accomplished here, Fran, and I, for one, am delighted to have a chance to meet you because I've heard all about you and seen you from afar. I'm delighted to get a little bit of your story here, and I'm sure we're only getting a little bit of the story.
Oh, there's so much happened I couldn't even tell you. You know, most of the stories you hear about me are true. That's the bad thing, you know.
That's a good ending right there.
That's the truth.
That's gonna make the final cut.
A picture.